Hi, my name is Lori Dickman. Welcome to Quilting with Lori. In this tutorial, I am going to give you an overview of how easy it is to put these 12 blocks and the center applique of this quilt together. I used my scrap stash for this, and it's a really simple quilt. You'd be very surprised. It looks complicated, but it isn't. The name of this quilt is Lotus in Bloom. It is my 2022 block of the month. It's an 8-month series. Each month and every 30 days thereafter, you receive 2 PDFs for 2 different blocks, as well as the corresponding videos that teach you how to put the blocks together. And what I used here was my scrap stash. But for the purposes of this overview, I'm going to use the kits that were prepared by my dear friend Jeanette Bussard, who owns a wonderful quilt shop in South Carolina called High Society Boutique. I'll have links below in the description box. So during the overview of this tutorial, I'm not going to give you sizes of all of the blocks. That's something that you'll get with the class itself. But I'm going to give you an overview of each and every block so you'll see just how easy it is to put them together. And I'm going to show you how to use those beautiful laser cut elements that you can get when you purchase the kit from Jeanette's shop. So let's take a look and see how this all goes together. So before I get started on the sewing of the blocks, I just wanted to share with you, I purchased the kit from Jeanette from highsociety.com, and I'll have all of these links in the description box below. But this is the laser cut kit, and this one includes all of the laser cut applique pieces with fusible web applied to the back. It also included 1 3/4 yards of background fabric, which is this beautiful batik here, and the 1/3 yard of the sashing fabric, which is the dark fabric, and I'll grab those here in a minute and show that to you. I also have one of these kits that includes all of the other fabrics that you'll need for the entire quilt. And she's put together 4 different colorways. The one that I have is the blues and hues, and they're just so many beautiful, beautiful batiks. And that's what I have cut all of my pieces from. She also has a colorway called the 365 Fifth Avenue and Maybow and the Black, White, and Brights. And you can see all of this out on the website. So I'm going to have the links below so you can go to her site and check out all of the kits that she has available and just see what those fabrics are. They're all beautiful. You'll have a hard time choosing. And here is the dark sashing fabric. I mentioned there's 1/3 of a yard of this beautiful dark blue sashing fabric and corresponding lotus blossom and swag applique pieces. They are already fused, they're laser cut, they're ready to be placed on your quilt and appliqued and on the blocks. Here is the beautiful lotus center with the pink and the yellow. They're already cut and ready to go. And these are the little swags that you'll use around the outside and the border. And here is a close-up of that so you can see what that looks like. Now let's get started on block number 1, and I'll be working through these blocks methodically from 1 through 12, and then we'll work on the center. So the first block is called Daybreak, and it is simply half square triangles. So all of these are going to be used to create half square triangles. There are a total of 8 pairs, and we'll be creating 16 half square triangles. 4 of the half square triangles will be medium blue and light blue. 2 half square triangles will be medium blue with the medium green. 2 half square triangles will be light blue with medium green. And then the remaining 8 half square triangles will be the medium green with the light background. So I'm going to go ahead and make those half square triangles. Again, to do that, you've seen me do this many times. We're simply going to draw a line from corner to corner. We're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides, do that assembly line. Then we're going to cut on the drawn line, press it open, square them up to a total of 2.5 inches for each of these. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll let you see me working on this, but it'll be in fast motion, and then I'll come back to my tabletop here when I've got that done. So the next block that I'm making is the odds and ends block, and I'm simply going to make a half square triangle unit out of a light background and an orange. And again, I'm just going to draw the diagonal lines, so a scant 1/4 of an inch on both sides, cut, square it up, press it open, and I'll have 2 units for the center of this block, so they'll create the center here. I also have 2 additional lights for the center, and then around the outer edge of this block are simply rectangles and squares. And I'm going to put it together in basically 3 rows once I have the center unit all put together. So let me show you how this is done. Okay, for the odds and ends block, I am simply going to put together this unit in the center, and then I'll sew these 2 rectangle strips together, and then I'll put together that row. For each of the corner units, I will sew together the 4 patches, and then I'll also sew together the rectangles, the 2 rectangles, and create these rows. So I will sew those together, and I'll show you the finished block in just a moment. So here I have the 3 rows put together. I've got the 4 patches on each end with the rectangles in the center. Make sure that all of the colored rectangles are toward the center of the block. And now I can put the 3 rows together, and then I can square it up, and I'll have this block finished. So block 1 and block 2 are finished, the daybreak and the odds and ends. Now we're on to block 3. And here is block 3. It is Susanna's cross, and it's simple to put together. It's basically just squares. One of the squares was cut. Actually, 2 of the squares were cut in the diagonal, and they're going to surround this center square here, which will create a square and a square. And so it's a very simple block to get to put together. I'm going to first of all sew this unit, square it up to the measurement that it requires, and then I'll create this row and the top row and the bottom row, and we'll put the block together. I'll be right back. One thing I do want to point out when you create a square and a square, if you fold your center square so that you can press the creases in the center of each of these areas there, then you can press a crease into the center of the bottom of that triangle, and then you have something to actually line up. So we'll line up that crease on the triangle with the crease on the square and sew it, and I will do opposite sides first, then I'll press them open, and then I'll finish the opposite sides here, and then I'll square up the square. So you'll see here I've got these 2 sides finished. Now I'm going to add the squares to these opposite sides and make sure that my creases match on my triangles and on my square, and I'll sew those 2, and then I'll press it open and square it up. And here you can see this was the last one that I put on there. I matched up the creases, and then you can start sewing right at that V, and you finish off over here. Then I'm going to press it open and square it up, and that center unit, it will be finished. So I have this unit ready to go. It's been squared up. I'm going to sew these 2 together, then I'm going to sew them to this unit, and then I'll sew these together, and I'll put the whole block together, and then I'll press it, square it up, and this block will be finished. So you'll see here I've got the 3 rows ready to go. I'm going to sew them together, press it, and square it up. So now I have daybreak finished, I have odds and ends finished, and I have just finished Susanna's cross. And I've got them pressed and all squared up. The next block that I'm going to work on is the electric fan, and this one has a little bit of the drunkard's path. So there's 4 little drunkard's paths units in there. So I'm going to show you how to sew that curved unit. Very simple. You'll enjoy being able to learn that if you don't already know how to do that. All right, in the pattern, the PDF pattern that you'll receive when you receive the information for this block in your email box, you're going to get the templates that you'll need to create the drunkard's path. And so I have gone ahead and made my C and D templates, and I am going to trace the C templates on the pink, and I'm going to trace the D templates on the dark purple here. and I will trace those and cut them out, and then I'll put the drunkard's paths units together, and there's 4 of each of these. So I'll trace those and cut those out, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have them all cut out and ready to go. I am going to press each of these units so that there is a crease line in the center of each of them, and that's the line that we'll use to match up the units together. It doesn't look like they're going to fit together, but they will. I'm going to pin right here, so that's how I start it. It's pinned just like that. Then I'm going to bring this around and make sure that it is lined up so that this is perfectly even here. And I'm going to pin that. You'll see how I've done that. Then I'm going to bring this one around and line it up there so that it also is perfectly even. Whoops, my fingers are getting in the way here. So at this point, here's what we have. And next, what I'm going to do is add an additional pin in the center here. So I'm going to add a pin here. Whoops. And a pin here. When I make larger drunkard's paths units that are like 5 inches or bigger, I don't necessarily have to use the pins, but when I'm dealing with something tiny like this, and this is going to finish at 2.5 inches, I definitely use pins. But this is how you want it to be pinned, and you want to make sure that these units at the end are as straight as you can get them. If they're cattywampus, then you're going to have a cattywampus drunkard's path when you're done sewing it. I like to sew mine with this unit on the bottom. Some people like to sew with the background facing them. Some people like to sew it with the pie slice facing them. I would suggest you practice both ways and see what works best for you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on this and sew this. I am sewing it with the pie slice facing me, and I'm sewing with a scant 1/4 inch. So it's not a complete 1/4 inch, it's a scant 1/4 inch. And as I go around the curve, I am removing the pins just before I get to them. And you want to raise and lower your presser foot so it releases the fabric. Okay, so let's see how I did. So here's our little drunkard's path unit. I haven't yet pressed it. It's got to be pressed with, as long as you're using a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance when you're doing a drunkard's path unit, you can press it either direction, toward the outside or toward the inside. I always press toward the darker part of the unit. So in this case, I'm going to press that direction, and it will work out fine. And then it's very important that each and every drunkard's path unit is squared up to the size that your pattern calls for. In the pattern PDF will tell you exactly what size these should be squared up to. One thing I do want to mention, if you're using a seam allowance that's larger than a 1/4 inch, you're definitely going to probably need to do some clipping. But I have found in all of the drunkard's paths, and I have done many in my life, I do not need to do any clipping of that seam allowance as long as it is a scant 1/4 inch. So just keep that in mind. If you do have any problems with it laying nicely, then you might want to do some clipping on the seam allowance portion of it. But I've never had to worry about that. So here are my little drunkard's paths unit. One has been pressed, but these do need to get pressed. I'm going to go do that, square them up, and I'm going to put them together as a 4-patch. Okay, so I have my little drunkard's paths units ready to go, and they will get sewn together like this. But before I do any more on that, I am going to create my half-square triangles. This block, the electric fan, does have a number of half-square triangles in it, so I'll be creating a total of 8 half-square triangles when this is all finished. So I have 2 sets of these colors together and 2 sets of these 2 colors together. And again, I drew the diagonal line. I'm going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on each side, cut it on the drawing line, square it up, press it open, and then I'll be able to lay out my block. I'll go ahead and do this, and I'll be right back. And you've seen me do this before when I cut apart my assembly line of half square triangles. I do cut straight across from stitching line to stitching line. It just helps to get rid of some excess fabric that you don't need when you're sewing these together. So I'm first of all doing that. Then you can cut them either with a rotary cutter or with the scissors. And I'm basically just cutting on the drawn line so that I have 2 half square triangle units with each one of these pairs that I sewed, and I will press them open and square them up. All right, so I have the half square triangle units finished, and they're all placed in here. There's basically 4 rows of 4 again, and so what I can do is web this block together by simply sewing these 2 rows together, then adding this one and this one. It doesn't matter how you put your block together, but I have got them ready to go, and I'm anxious to see what the finished block looks like. I do want to point out that although this tutorial that I'm giving to you is an overview, you're not seeing the step-by-step instructions that you would see if you were part of this class. If you actually registered for the Block of the Month class, every tutorial that you received would be step-by-step for each part of every block, and you'd see a whole lot more information. But I just want to show you just how simple these blocks are for this Lotus and Bloom Block of the Month. So here I have finished the electric fan block. So now I have 4 of these blocks ready, and I am going to head on to block number 5, which is the daybreak block. So let me pull that out and I'll lay it out for you to see. So here is the plated block that I'm going to be putting together. I've sort of got it laid out here. Before I can really start putting it together, I'm going to be creating some half square triangles, and they're going to go in these spots right here. I have sewn across the row, and once all of these units are sewn together, that will make it much smaller. It will match this. But I'm creating half square triangle units that are going to go in these spots and in these spots, and I'll be using the light background with the dark purple and the light purple to create those half square triangles. So let me get that done, and then I'll place them within this square, and you'll understand where it all belongs. All right, so I have the half square triangles created. So I've got a couple of them in each of these corner units. There's a total of 8 half square triangle units. So this corner unit is going to be put together like that, and this corner unit will be put together here, and that corner unit, and that corner unit. So I'll do my corner units together, and then I'll put my the square and the rectangle together, and then I'll be able to do this row, and it will match up to this center row, which I've already put together. So let me get that done, and I'll show you what it looks like. So here is one corner unit. I've sewn the 3 little rows together, and now I'm going to sew that corner unit together into one piece. So here you can see the units for the corner at the top up here. I had that turned around. There we go. That's correct. So I can sew this row together, and it will match this row, and then I will make these units. I'll create each of these and sew this bottom section together. So here is the finished block, and it really is a simple block. It looks very complicated, but it isn't. It's a really fun and simple block. I have it ready and all of the others. Now I'm going to start the next block. All right, so this is the next block that we'll be doing. This is block number 6, and it's called Susanna's Twirl. And again, the center unit is using some triangles that we're going to sew around this center square. And then basically the rest of it is nothing but squares. So I'll put this center unit together first, then I'll sew these together so that I can create this row. And then I'll sew these rows together and put the block together. So the Sarah's Choice block is basically made up of a total of 12 half square triangles and 4 squares that are in the corners. So I'm going to be putting together my half square triangles the same way that I have done in the past that you've seen, where I'm drawing a diagonal line, sewing a 1/4 of an inch, a scant 1/4 of an inch on both sides of the line, cutting on the line, getting them squared up and then pressed open so that they're ready to be put in the block. So let me make those half square triangles and I'll be right back. So here we see the Sarah's Choice block. Again, it's just 4 rows of 4. These are all half square triangles except for the 4 outer corners. And now I can simply web the block together and get it ready. I'll do that and I'll be right back. The Sarah's Choice block, it's all put together. There, it's basically half square triangles and 4 corner squares and 4 rows of 4. Very simple to put together. Now that that one is ready, I am going to show you how to put together the Sawtooth 16 patch. And that one I've pretty much laid out here. Again, there are half square triangles, and I'm not going to have you watch me make those again, but you've seen this done enough. But there are half square triangles in the outer sections of the rows here. And there are 4 corner squares here, and then there's a 16 patch in the center. So what I'm going to do is literally sew the 16 patch first, and then I can sew the rows together here. So I'll get that done and I will be right back. Sawtooth 16 patch is finished. That block is out of the way. The next one that I will be showing you is the hourglass block right here. So I'll lay that out here in a minute so you can see how that's put together. Hourglass block, again, it is all half square triangles is what we're going to be creating there, a total of 16 of them. And so we have 3 pinks, 3 dark blues, and 3 dark green shades that we're using. And then I've got the light background square that I'm going to put with each one of these to create the half square triangle. So on every single one of these, I will be drawing a diagonal line and doing the half square triangle process as you've seen me do before. Basically, we need to have a total of 4 of these half square triangles, a total of 6 of half square triangles with the blue, and a total of 6 half square triangles with the pink. So that'll make a total of 16 half square triangles. Here is the hourglass. I have it all laid out. There are a total of 16 half square triangles. The outer 4 are the green, and these are the blue, and those are the pink with the white, or the light background. So now I'm going to go ahead and web the block and put it together. I'll show you what it looks like in just a minute. Here is the hourglass block. It's basically all half square triangles, and you just simply need to make sure you orient the half square triangles properly within the block to create it. Now I'm going to show you the next one, which is Plentiful. And it also is just half square triangles, and they go together so quickly using my technique. By the time you're done with this quilt, you will be a pro. And again, as I mentioned before, with the tutorials that you'll be receiving with the purchased class, you're getting step-by-step instructions for each and every block. With this tutorial that I'm giving to you today, it's just an overview, so you get an idea of how the quilt goes together. Let me lay out this block for you, and I'll show you how it goes together. With the Plentiful block, you basically have 8 yellow squares that we are going to use to create half square triangles. 4 of them are going to be created with the light background. So we'll place those on there, and again, the same process will take place where I'll draw a diagonal line. So on each side of that diagonal line, cut it apart and press it open. And then 4 of these half square triangles will be created using this beautiful blue. And so I'll have a total of 16 half square triangles once I work that out with these 8 squares. I wanted to show you again the way that I square up all of my half square triangles is using the Clearly Perfect slotted trimmers here. And this is this trimmer A, which will work with any half square triangle that's 1.5 to 6.5. There's another ruler trimmer B, which is for even size half square triangles. And all you do is simply locate the seam line on your triangle there and line up the proper size. And in this case, I'm squaring them up to 2.5 inches. So I'm lining up this dotted seam line to the seam line on the triangle. And then I am simply going to trim around, and you'll notice there's not a whole lot, that comes away from there, but that's really important that that is removed. If all of this was left in each of the blocks, we would not have a block that would be a properly sized block at all. We'd be so frustrated. So it's important that you do trim that away. And the neat thing about the clearly slotted trimmers is that they also have these little lines here which allow you to trim away the excess fabric on the little corners there. And so there you go. So that is trimmed away. So when the half square triangle is opened, you don't have that excess there. So that is how, that's what I use to square up my half square triangles. So I've laid out the plentiful block. And isn't it amazing? So many different designs can be made using different value fabric and half square triangles. And it's just a 4x4 layout is all this is. And so just as you're going through the pattern, the PDF of instructions that you'll receive when you order the class, you'll see exactly how you need to lay it out. The tutorial will show you step by step. But now I'm going to go ahead and web this block and get it put together, and I'll show you the finished block in just a moment. So here is Plentiful. It is complete. Again, another variation of what you can do with half square triangles. It's a beautiful little block. The next one that I'll show you is the Gracious Lady. And again, it's half square triangles, but it's going to create another look. And I'm anxious to show it to you. Give me a few minutes and I'll have it laid out for you. So the Gracious Lady block is made with half square triangles, and the same process is followed. So I have 8 of these orange squares that I've placed here on the mat, and 2 of them are going to be made into half square triangles with the green, and the remaining 6 will use the light background, and that's how I'll create a total of 16 half square triangles. So here is the Gracious Lady block, and there's so many different ways or so many different blocks you can make simply using half square triangles. And this is another layout with all half square triangles. The outer 4 corners have the green on the outside, and all of the rest of the half square triangles are the cream with the gold. And it's creating a beautiful star here. So I'm going to go ahead and web this together, and I'll show you the finished block when I'm finished. So the next block we're going to be making is called Day's End. And it's a little bit different. There are a number of half square triangles, but there's also some half square triangles that are made by, first of all, putting together 2 quarter square triangles, I guess you could call them. So what you're going to do is lay out the 2 units just as I have them here, and you're going to sew them from, in fact, you're going to want to start sewing at the bottom on the straight edge, but you're going to sew each of these down the center here to create one portion of the half square triangle unit, and then it will be sewn with the light background. So let me show you how that's done. So first I'm simply going to take each of these and put them together, and because it's a batik, it doesn't really matter which side is, they're both right side or wrong side, so I'm not too worried about that. I am starting the sewing on the straight edge. So after I put them together, I'm flipping it like that so that I'm starting sewing on the straight edge of that triangle. Put that one a little crooked, but hopefully he'll work out okay. And here is the last one. Okay. So here they are, all in an assembly line or a chain stitched. So there they go. I'm going to go ahead and press them open, and then we're going to attach each of these or sew each of these with the light and create a half square triangle. So let me show you how that's done. What I like to do when I sew these together is fold the light background triangle in half, make sure there's a crease there, and match up that center crease to that center seam allowance. And then you're going to go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance along that edge, and then once we're done doing that, we're going to square this up to 2.5 inches. So I've sewn a few of them already. I am leaving that seam allowance underneath pressed open. So here we go. I've got this crease matching that seam allowance, and we'll sew this seam allowance here. So here they all are, and what I'm going to do now is square them up to 2.5 inches using my square up ruler and press them open, and I will have the center units ready for this block. So now I have half square triangle units to make 2 with the blue and light background and 4 with the yellow and the light background, and so there's a total of 6 units here, which will end up creating a total of 12 half square triangles. And this is a process you've seen me do many times before, so I will go ahead and draw my diagonal lines, sew on each side, cut them apart, square them up, and press them open, and I will be back shortly to show you the finished half square triangle units. So here's the block laid out, and you'll notice in the center that those units that we made initially, they're like a little pinwheel. They're forming a pinwheel in the center. And then the half square triangles on the outer 4 corners have the blue facing outward, and then the yellows are all facing inward, and it makes up another beautiful block. And again, this one is all created using some sort of a half square triangle. So here is the finished block, and this one's called Day's End. A beautiful block, really very easy to put together. It looked complicated, but it really wasn't. These were sewn together before they were sewn with the half square triangle unit, so that was a very simple method to put those together, and then the rest of it was half square triangles. So the last block we have for the center of the quilt will be 4 of these lotus blossoms, and we'll simply just remove these from the bags. I had gotten these as a kit, and all of the parts for this lotus blossom are already precision cut with the fuse already attached. And basically what we'll be doing is applying this, and I have to remove the paper, but I just want to show you first of all how these are going to lay on this block. And we're just lining them up, the straight edges with the edges of the block here, and there we go. And so that is how the block will be placed on, the lotus blossom will be placed on the block. And of course we have to remove the fusible here so that we can fuse it to the block. And if you can't get the fuse away from the fabric, use a pin and just kind of cut the paper a little bit from the back side, and that will help you to grab onto that paper and get it removed. So there we go. I'm pulling all that paper off. Now I'm going to place this back on the block. And I had folded my squares in half and then in half again, and just pressed the creases in. I always like to do that. It just kind of serves as a guideline so that I know things are laying on my block centered properly. So there we go. Now this pink one will go here, and this blue, or like yellow, will go on the pink right there. And it is ready now to be fused, as long as you're happy with it. What I'm going to do though, I am going to lay out all 4 of my blocks, and I'm going to make sure that each of the applique elements match up nicely where they're going to meet up. So I want to make sure that my blue lotus matches up beautifully here as well as here, because that blue lotus flower is going to be going all the way around here. And I want to make sure that I've got everything neatly matched up from one block to the next block. I don't want there to be any areas or gaps there. So I'll do that first, and then when I'm pleased with that, that's when I will press everything down, and then I will set up my machine for applique. I think I'll use a navy thread and just do an outline stitch, an edge stitch, if you will, on the navy portion, pink on this pink petal, and yellow for the center. So I've attached yellow thread, embroidery thread, in my machine, and I'm going to do a straight stitch on the edge of this yellow part. I'm going to start with that, then I'm going to go to pink, and then I'm going to do the navy. So here we go. Here is one of the blocks that I have appliqued, and I've simply done an edge stitch with the yellow thread, with pink thread, and with navy thread, which you can't really see, and just did a simple edge stitch all the way around. Now these applique elements were a part of the kit, and you can purchase the kit from the High Society Boutique, and those links are all below in my description box. But you can also just use the pattern where you can trace these elements onto the fusible web and cut them out yourself and fuse them to the fabrics that you're planning to use for your quilt. So with this Lotus in Bloom quilt, you can use your own fabrics, use your scrap fabrics, use your batiks, whatever you choose. So here I have the 4 lotus blossoms sewn together. They've been appliqued. I used the yellow, the pink, and the navy blue embroidery thread, and I simply did an edge stitch. And with my edge stitch, I am using this foot. And what I like about this foot is that there is a, let me see if I can get a pointer here. There is an 1/8 of an inch line on each side here that I can easily follow as I'm sewing around and appliquing. That way I can stay an 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the elements. So it's a great foot. If you're interested in that, I'll put a link in the description box below. And now that I have this ready to go, I am going to get all of these appliqued. So I went ahead and put them on my rectangles, and there are instructions in the pattern that tell you what size rectangles to cut for your border. All of these I simply folded in half. I folded the element in half so that I could match it up, and I just simply eyeballed so that the top of this is sitting about the same distance on all of them. This is obviously going to have a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance there and a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance there. And so I've attached all of those. First of all, I removed all the paper, placed it on there. Once I was happy with its placement, then I fused it. And now I brought it here and I'm going to applique. I am going to use my navy blue thread, and I'm simply going to start here and just go around edge stitching, coming around the bottom, finishing around this side, and coming around the top. So I'll do each element. It's only taking about 3 to 4 minutes per square in the border to actually applique that. Okay, so I have finished putting together the center, and I went ahead and just sewed it together, and then I will attach, I'll put 2 blocks together on its side and sew them together so that will be the entire center row. What I have done is made sure that my center lotus flower matches nicely when I sewed it together. So it is all put together. You can see I just did a simple edge stitch all the way around, just a single straight stitch for applique, I used the thread that matched the color of the element, whether it was navy, pink, or yellow, whatever you want to do. It's totally up to you. Maybe you want yours to contrast. So that is ready to go. I've gone through and taken care of all of my border swags, so they have all been sewn or appliqued with an edge stitch. And like I said, it went together very quickly. It doesn't take long at all to get all of those appliqued. These are the 4 corner blocks in my border. And when I sew these together, I will be sewing 4 of these swags together, and then a corner block will go in each corner of the quilt itself, and I'll show you that on the wall here in a minute. And then of course you can arrange your blocks all the way around. There's 4 on the first row, 4 in the bottom row, and then 4 that would be on each side of the lotus blossom. And here are some of those blocks that I finished up. Had a lot of fun, created them. A lot of this is half square triangles. Some of it is just simply squares. But you've seen that technique that I use with my Speedy Solutions to create the half square triangles, and it's really a very simple way to put them together. And you become a pro at it, and this is the only one that used curved seam, and that was the Drunkard's Path. So now let's take a look at the Lotus in Bloom quilt on the wall here. So here is the Lotus Blossoms quilt right here. This is my Lotus in Bloom. It's my block of the month for 2022, and it is still available and will remain available to anyone who's interested. And I've had so many requests for it, and people are really enjoying putting it together. They're finding that it is really easy, and the purpose of this video is to show those of you who are anxious to try it but a little nervous about it. It truly is a simple one to make. So I did an overview. That was the purpose of this video, to give you an overview of how the blocks go together, so you'll see that it is quite simple to do. And you can use your scraps, or you can use the kits that are available from High Society Boutique, and I have links below. So you can use beautiful kits. The fabrics that you saw me use when I created these blocks here were from one of the kits from High Society. I also had purchased the kit of all of the Lotus Blossom the elements, as well as the swag and tassels for the borders. So all of that I purchased from High Society, and it was already fused with the fusible web, and they're laser cut. All you have to do is simply remove the paper and press them in place. Very simple, beautiful quilt, and I think you'll enjoy it. It is an 8-month block of the month. It's got 2 blocks that will be presented every month. So once you register and pay for the class, you immediately get 2 of the first blocks and videos, complete videos that show you how to create the blocks. What I showed you again in this video today is just an overview, but the videos that you get when you purchase the class are complete videos, so you'll understand step by step how to put it together. And every month, every 30 days, 2 more blocks will drop into your inbox. You'll have the PDFs, you'll have the videos. They'll always be yours. You can put this together at your own pace. You don't have to hurry through it. It's available to you forever. As long as YouTube is available with my videos, you'll be able to access them. And by the 7th month, you're going to get 2 different blocks here for the center. You're going to get either the Lotus Basket or the Lotus Blossom. The Lotus Blossom is here. It is an applique, and the Lotus Basket is a pieced basket. And I'll show a picture of that at the end. And then, of course, the 8th month is all of the sashing and the borders, so that you can accomplish that and put your quilt together. It's just a beautiful quilt. I sure hope that you'll try it. If you do have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to ask me. Make sure that if you like the content that I'm providing you with my Quilting with Lori channel, please don't forget to like and subscribe so that you get notified whenever I put out a new tutorial. And I try to do that at least 2 times a week and sometimes more. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you have any questions at all, go to my website, quiltingwithlori.com. Check out the courses in my shop, and you'll see all about this and any other courses that I offer. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a great day, and happy quilting.